In Dodge City, a man could do a terrible thing as long as he called it law. Tie two women to a post, call it debt. Leave them under the summer sun, their hands bound and their voices ignored. Call it discipline. Promise them a life they never chose, inside a house that would never let them leave. Call it marriage. And if you owned enough land, enough cattle, and enough men with guns, nobody would argue. That's how the Whitlock family ruled that summer. Not with shouting, not with chaos, but with quiet certainty that nobody would stand against them. The land they owned stretched farther than most men could ride in a day. Their cattle fed half the trails running north. Their money sat in the bank on Front Street. And their name carried weight in every room where decisions were made. And that morning, just outside Dodge City, they decided two young women belonged to them. The night before, Eleanor and Rosalie had tried to run. They made it less than 2 miles before Reuben Voss dragged them back. By morning, Martha wanted a lesson made in front of every hired hand. Not because the girls were dangerous, because freedom was. Eleanor Vale stood tied to one post, her dress dusty, her shoulders strained from the rope pulling tight against her wrists. Her eyes were tired, but they were not broken. She watched everything, every man, every movement, every lie being spoken like it was truth. Rosalie Vale hung from the second post, her head lowered at first, strands of hair clinging to her face from sweat and heat. But when she lifted her eyes, there was fire in them. Not fear, not surrender, just anger, waiting for a chance to breathe. They were 21 years old, and already being told their lives were over. Gideon Whitlock stood a few steps ahead of them, boots planted firm in the dirt, one hand resting near his belt like he owned not just the land, but the air itself. Beside him stood Martha Whitlock, calm and composed, like this was no more than a matter of paperwork being settled. To her, this wasn't cruelty, it was order. Reuben Voss leaned against a post nearby, a Winchester 1873 resting easy in his hands. He watched the girls the way a man watches livestock that hasn't learned its place yet. Around them stood half a dozen ranch hands, armed and silent. Men who knew this was wrong. Men who chose not to say a word. Deputy Aaron Pike stood at the edge of it all, hat low, eyes shifting, caught between the badge on his chest and the fear in his gut. No one moved. No one stepped forward. Because in Dodge City, standing against the Whitlocks didn't just cost you a fight. It cost you your job, your home, sometimes your life. Gideon spoke calmly, like a man settling business. He told the girls they owed his family that. He told them their father had taken money he never paid back. He told them this was the only fair way to settle it. Work in his house, do as they were told, and in time, become part of the family. Eleanor didn't answer. Rosalie kicked dust toward his boots. Reuben took a step forward, raising the rifle just enough to remind her how this would end if she kept that up. Still, nobody stopped them, because every man there had already decided it wasn't his problem. That's when the sound of hooves broke through the silence, slow, steady, not rushing, not afraid. A single rider came in from the far edge of the ranch, cutting through the heat like he had all the time in the world. He didn't look like a lawman, didn't wear a badge, didn't carry himself like someone trying to prove anything. Dust covered his coat, his hat sat low, shading eyes that had seen more than most men cared to remember. He rode closer, taking in the scene without asking a single question. He saw the ropes first, then the bruises, then the men holding guns, then the ones pretending not to. He slowed his horse, letting the silence stretch just long enough for everyone to notice him. Gideon turned, annoyed more than concerned. Reuben shifted his grip on the rifle. Deputy Pike watched carefully, like he knew something was about to change. The rider stopped a few steps away. He swung down from the saddle without hurry, boots hitting the dirt with a soft thud. He didn't reach for his gun, didn't raise his voice. He just looked at the two women tied to those posts, really looked. Like he understood exactly what was happening, and exactly what it meant. Then he turned his gaze to the men responsible, measured the distance, counted the guns, felt the weight of the moment without needing anyone to explain it. Gideon spoke first, his tone sharp. He asked the stranger if he was lost, if he knew whose land he was standing on, if he understood the kind of trouble he was about to walk into. The man didn't answer any of that. He took one step forward, just one, enough to make every gun there feel a little heavier. And then he spoke. Calm, quiet, certain. Let them go. For a second, nobody moved. Not because they didn't hear him, but because they weren't used to hearing anyone say that. Reuben laughed first, low and ugly. One of the ranch hands followed. Gideon's expression didn't change, but his eyes hardened. He asked the stranger who he thought he was. The man didn't give a name, didn't explain himself, because men like him didn't need introductions. Reuben pushed off the post and stepped forward, lifting the rifle just enough to make his point. He told the stranger to get back on his horse and ride away while he still could. The man didn't move, didn't blink, didn't reach for his gun. He just stood there, like the decision had already been made long before he rode into that dust. Around him, the air felt tighter, heavier, like the whole scene was holding its breath. Because deep down, every man standing there knew one thing. If that stranger didn't walk away, this wasn't going to end with words, and once it started, there would be no putting it back. So the question wasn't whether something bad was about to happen. The question was who would still be standing when it did. And more than that, one question lingered, hanging heavier than the heat itself. Was this nameless gunslinger about to die for two women he didn't even know? Or was he the one man in Dodge City who could finally bring the Whitlock family down? The laughter didn't last long. Reuben Voss took one more step forward, raising that Winchester just a little higher. Like he'd done it 100 times before. Men like him believed a rifle solved most problems, and most days they were right. Reuben swung the stock toward Silas, fast and mean, aiming to end the conversation before it even began. Silas almost didn't move in time. The rifle grazed his shoulder hard enough to turn him halfway around. For one ugly second, it looked like Reuben had him. Then Silas drove his boot into Reuben's knee, caught the rifle with both hands, and used the man's own weight against him. Reuben hit the dirt hard, but Silas staggered too. That mattered, because this wasn't a trick. It was a fight. Nobody laughed after that. The ranch hands froze. Gideon Whitlock's jaw tightened. Martha didn't move at all, but her eyes changed, like she was already thinking 3 steps ahead. Silas didn't draw his gun. He just stood there, calm as ever. Like putting a man in the dirt was no bigger deal than brushing dust off his coat. Then he looked back at the ropes, at Eleanor, at Rosalie. He stepped past Reuben like the man didn't matter anymore and walked straight to the posts. For a second, nobody stopped him. Not because they were cowards, because every rifle there had Eleanor or Rosalie standing too close to the line of fire, and Deputy Pike, scared or not, had one hand near his own revolver. One bad shot would turn a lesson into a killing, right in front of a badge. That was the strange part. It wasn't fear, it was confusion, because nobody in a long time had walked straight through the Whitlock name like it didn't mean anything. Silas pulled a knife from his belt and cut Eleanor free first. The rope dropped, and her arms fell heavy at her sides. She didn't thank him. Didn't say a word. She just looked at him, studying him the same way he had studied everything else. Then he moved to Rosalie. Her hands were shaking, but not from fear. From holding it in too long. The rope snapped loose, and she stepped forward like she'd been waiting her whole life for that moment. Reuben groaned behind them, trying to push himself up. One of the ranch hands took a step forward, unsure whether to help him or stop Silas. That's when Gideon raised his voice, not loud, just enough to remind everyone who was in charge. He told Silas to stop right there, said this wasn't some roadside misunderstanding, said those girls belonged under his authority. Silas turned slowly, like he had all the time in the world. He looked at Gideon, then at the men with guns, then at the deputy standing off to the side pretending this was all normal. Silas spoke plain. He said nobody belongs to anybody. Not out here. Not anywhere. Gideon didn't argue. He reached into his coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. Held it up like it weighed more than every gun on that ranch. He said it was a debt agreement. Signed by the girl's father. Said the land, the money, and the obligation now belonged to the Whitlocks. Said those two girls weren't prisoners. As far as Gideon was concerned, he owned them fair and square. Owned, that word sat in the air longer than it should have. Rosalie stepped forward like she was about to lunge at him, but Eleanor caught her arm, not to stop her, to keep her from making it worse. Silas didn't reach for the paper. Didn't argue about law or signatures. He just looked at Deputy Pike. That was the moment everything shifted just a little, because now it wasn't about strength. It was about whether the law would speak up. Pike hesitated. You could see it on his face. The badge on his chest said one thing. The fear in his eyes said another. He cleared his throat, slow and uneasy. Said that paper gave the Whitlocks legal claim. Said if the girls ran, it could be called theft of labor. Said if Silas interfered, it could be called kidnapping. Nobody liked the way that sounded, but nobody argued either. Because deep down, everyone there knew how things worked in Dodge City. You didn't need the truth. You just needed the right paper and the right name behind it. Silas stood there a second longer, thinking. Not about the fight. That part was easy. He was thinking about what came after, because shooting his way out would be simple. Keeping those two girls free after that would not. He finally nodded once, like he'd made up his mind. Then he stepped back, not in surrender, in control. He told Gideon that they were going into Dodge City. Said if the law was so certain, then it could say so in front of witnesses. So Gideon smiled at that. He let them go because Dodge City was his kind of battlefield. Out on the ranch, Silas had nerve, fists, and dust. In town, Gideon had papers, bankers, doctors, and men who owed him favors. And Gideon believed the law already belonged to him. Martha gave a small nod, like this was exactly what she wanted all along. Reuben got back to his feet, slower this time. His pride hurt worse than his body. Silas helped Eleanor onto his horse without asking permission. Rosalie took the reins of a loose ranch horse nearby, still watching every man there like she was memorizing faces. Deputy Pike turned his head, pretending not to see the anger in Reuben's eyes. The group started moving toward Dodge City, dust rising behind them. From a distance, it looked like nothing more than a quiet ride back to town, but anyone paying attention could feel it. This wasn't over, because the moment they stepped into Dodge City, this stopped being about ropes and fists. It became something far more dangerous. And the real question was this. When the law itself is twisted, where does a man like Silas Crow draw the line next?
And if you like stories about quiet men, hard choices, and the kind of justice that doesn't come easy, subscribe now.
Dodge City didn't greet them with gunfire. It greeted them with noise, wagons rolling, men shouting over cattle, piano keys fighting to stay in tune inside a saloon that never really closed. On the surface, it looked like any other summer day, but under that noise, something else was waiting. Silas could feel it the moment they crossed into town. Too many eyes. Too many men pretending not to look. Word had already spread. The Whitlocks didn't need to chase the trouble. Trouble moved ahead of them. Silas led the horse down Front Street, steady and quiet. Eleanor rode beside Silas, arms still sore, but her mind working. Rosalie followed on the loose ranch horse, watching every corner, every doorway, every man who touched his gun a second too long. They stopped near a boarding house, nothing fancy, just clean enough to pass and quiet enough to think. Silas helped them down. No big gesture, just steady hands like he'd done it 1,000 times before. Inside, the air was cooler. For a moment, it felt like they could breathe again. But that didn't last long. Eleanor sat at a small table, her fingers still stiff, and reached into her bag. She pulled out an old, worn book. Not a Bible. Not a letter. A ranch book. The kind men used to count cattle and track water. Her father's book. She flipped through the pages. slow but certain. Numbers, dates, notes about rain, notes about dry seasons, then something else. Entries about land, about offers, about a name that kept coming up, Whitlock. Silas didn't lean in right away. He let her find it on her own. That mattered more. Eleanor stopped on one page and tapped it lightly. She said her father never trusted big deals. Said if something felt rushed, then it was probably a trap. In the margin, next to a date, was a short line. Turned Whitlock down again. Rosalie let out a quiet breath. Said that didn't sound like a man who owed anything. Silas nodded once. Didn't smile. Didn't say I told you so. He just said if a man refuses a deal and ends up dead a week later, that's not luck. That's timing. A knock came at the door. Not loud, not soft, just careful. Silas didn't reach for his gun right away. He looked at the shadow under the door first. One man. Still. He opened it halfway. Deputy Pike stood there, hat in his hands like he wasn't sure he should be. He stepped inside without waiting to be invited, closed the door behind him. For a second, nobody spoke. Pike didn't look like a hero walking in. He looked like a man who had run out of excuses. That kind of courage isn't pretty, but sometimes it's the only kind a man has left. Then Pike pulled something from his pocket. A single piece of brass, a spent cartridge. He set it on the table. Said he'd been holding on to it for a long time. Said it came from the wreck where their father died. Rosalie leaned in, eyes sharp, asked what it meant. Pike didn't dance around it. He said that kind of round didn't belong near a simple wagon accident. He said it matched the kind of rifle Reuben Voss carried. The room got quiet, not shocked, just heavier, because now the story wasn't about dead anymore. It was about a man who might have been killed for his land. Eleanor closed the book slowly. Her hands didn't shake this time. She said if that was true, then the paper Gideon carried wasn't just wrong. It was built on a lie. Silas looked at Pike, asked why he was bringing this now. Pike didn't look proud, didn't look brave. He looked tired. Said he had a brother working out at the Whitlock ranch. Said speaking up before would have put him in the ground. Then he looked at the two women, said maybe staying quiet was worse. Silas studied him for a second, then nodded. That was enough. Outside, the street noise kept rolling like nothing had changed. System, but inside that room, everything had, because now they had something real. Not proof yet, but a crack in the story Whitlock had been selling. Rosalie stood up first, said she didn't want to run anymore, said if her father was killed, she wanted it known. Eleanor didn't argue. She just looked at Silas, not asking, decided. Silas took a slow breath. Then he said they weren't leaving Dodge City. Not yet. He said if the truth was buried, it was buried close. And men like Gideon Whitlock didn't carry all their secrets in their pockets. Some of them were still sitting out on that land, waiting to be found. Pike shifted uneasily. Said Whitlock wouldn't sit still either. Said once they knew this was turning, they'd move fast, hide what needed hiding, burn what needed burning. Silas gave a small nod. That was exactly what he expected. Which meant one thing. They were already running out of time. And somewhere out on that ranch, there was one piece of truth that could bring the whole Whitlock name down. The only question was, would they find it first? Or would Whitlock erase it before anyone in Dodge City dared to listen? Silas didn't wait for another night. Men who planned to burn evidence didn't wait either. By the time Dodge City started pouring whiskey and counting cattle, Silas was already moving, not rushing. Just moving with purpose. He stepped out onto Front Street like any other man, hat low, eyes calm, like he had nothing to hide and nowhere special to be. That was the trick. In a town like Dodge, the man who looked nervous was the man everyone watched. Silas looked like he belonged. Eleanor walked beside him, holding that ranch book like it mattered more than anything else she owned. Because now, it did. Rosalie stayed just a step behind, eyes sharp, watching hands, not faces. She was learning fast. Deputy Pike split off before they reached the bank. Didn't say much, just gave Silas a look that said that he'd do what he could. And in a town like this, sometimes that was all a man had to offer. The bank sat quiet, cooler than the street, with thick wood counters and a man behind them who knew every name that mattered. Eleanor didn't hesitate. She asked to see the debt record tied to her father. The clerk didn't like that. You could tell. He stalled, flipped pages that didn't need flipping, looked toward the door like he expected someone to walk in and save him from answering. Silas didn't lean on the counter, didn't raise his voice. He just stood there, waiting. That kind of patience made people nervous. Finally, the clerk pulled the paper, laid it down. Eleanor didn't rush. She read it slow, line by line. Her finger stopped halfway down. Then she read it again. Rosalie leaned in, but didn't interrupt. Eleanor said one quiet thing. That's not his hand. The clerk stiffened, asked what she meant. Eleanor pointed to the signature. Said her father never wrote his name that way. I said one letter was always curved, not straight. Small detail. Easy to miss. Unless you grew up watching that hand write every day. Silas didn't smile, but something settled in his eyes. That was one crack. Not enough to break a man like Gideon Whitlock, but enough to start. They stepped back out into the street. Sun higher now, heat heavier, and the town felt tighter, like it was watching them. Rosalie said they should leave, said they had enough to know the truth. Silas shook his head. Truth didn't matter unless someone heard it, and right now, the wrong people were the only ones talking. They found Harlan Meeks near the edge of town, working slow with a team of tired horses. Old man, back bent, eyes that had seen more than he wanted to remember. Rosalie asked him straight about the day her father died. He didn't answer, just kept working. Silas stepped closer, didn't threaten him, didn't push. He just said a man can carry silence for a long time, but it always gets heavier. Harlan stopped, didn't turn round right away. Then he said he saw Reuben Voss near that wagon, said the wheel didn't just break, said something had been done to it. That was the second crack, bigger than the first. But still not enough, not yet. Back on Front Street, the mood had changed. More men standing still, more whispers, more hands resting near guns. And then the Whitlocks arrived, not rushing, not angry, just certain. Gideon stepped into the street like he owned it. Martha right beside him, calm as ever. Caleb and Jonas followed, seated, carried by men who treated them like something fragile and dangerous at the same time. The whole town felt it. This wasn't business anymore. This was control. Gideon didn't shout. He spoke like a man used to being heard. Said Silas had interfered with lawful business. Said the girls were under his protection by a legal agreement. Said this nonsense would end today. Martha stepped forward then. She held up another paper. Said a doctor had signed it. Said Eleanor and Rosalie were not fit to make decisions after their father's death. Said they needed guardianship. Said the Whitlocks had stepped in out of duty. That word hit harder than it should have. Duty. Like cruelty dressed up in clean clothes. Rosalie took a step forward. Guy stopped her with one hand. Not rough, just firm. He was thinking again. Not about the fight, about the angle, because now the town had heard both sides, and men in towns like this didn't choose truth. They chose what felt safer. Deputy Pike stood off to the side, caught in the middle again. But this time, he didn't look away. He watched Gideon, he watched Martha, and he knew something Silas already did. If they didn't move soon, this would be over before it ever really began, because papers could be replaced, witnesses could disappear, and fires had a way of starting at the right time. Silas turned slightly, eyes drifting toward the horizon beyond town, back toward the ranch, back toward where all of this started. That's where the real truth was, not in the bank, not in the street, out there, where Whitlock thought no one would dare look. He made the decision right then, quiet, final, and the moment he did, everything shifted. Because now they weren't defending themselves anymore. They were going after the one thing Whitlock couldn't afford to lose. So the only question left was, could they get to that ranch in time? Before Whitlock burned the truth to the ground, they didn't ride out as a group. That would have been too easy to spot, too easy to stop. Silas left first, alone, like a man heading back to unfinished business. No rush, no panic, just another rider kicking up dust on the edge of town. Eleanor and Rosalie followed later, cutting wide past the main road, keeping low along the dry grass where wagon tracks faded out. Deputy Pike stayed behind just long enough to be seen in Dodge City, then slipped out quiet, like a man finally choosing a side. By the time the sun started dropping, they were all moving toward the same place, Whitlock land. From a distance, the ranch looked peaceful, cattle grazing, fences straight. A place a man might build a life if he didn't know better, but Silas knew better. Places like that didn't stay quiet by accident. They stayed quiet because someone made sure of it. He slowed his horse before reaching the main trail, got down, walked the last stretch. Less noise that way. Less chance of a rifle waiting where it shouldn't be. The barn sat to the left, main house ahead. Storage shed off to the side, old wood, half leaning, like nobody cared about it anymore. That's the kind of place men hide things, not the strong safe, not the locked office, the place nobody bothers to look. Silas waited in the shadow, watching, counting men, listening. One voice from the barn, two near the house. And somewhere out there, Reuben Voss. He always stayed close when things mattered. Eleanor and Rosalie reached him just after dusk. No words. They didn't need them. Silas pointed once toward the old shed. That was the target. They moved low, quiet, one step at a time. Rosalie first, quick and careful, Eleanor right behind her, holding tight to that ranch book like it was part of her. The shed door creaked when it opened. Too loud, they froze, waited. No shout, no footsteps coming fast. They slipped inside. Pike stayed outside by the corner of the shed, watching the yard. For once, that badge was guarding the right people. Dark, dry, smelled like old wood and dust. Eleanor found a lantern, turned it low, just enough light to see shapes, crates, tools. They searched the first crate and found nothing but old tack. The second held rusted tools. The third was empty, except for mouse droppings and a broken spur. For a moment, it felt like they had risked everything for dust. Then Eleanor noticed fresh scratches on the floorboards beneath a feed sack. Silas moved the sack aside. There, tucked under a loose board, sat a small metal box, locked, not fancy, but hidden by someone who expected trouble. Silas worked the latch with his knife. It took longer than he liked. Then it opened. Inside was paper, stacks of it, and near the bottom, wrapped in cloth, was the original deed. Eleanor's hands moved fast now, not shaking anymore. Focused. She pulled out one sheet, then another. Her breathing changed. Rosalie leaned in, asked what she saw. Eleanor didn't look up. She said the land was never sold. Not even close. Said the debt had been nearly paid off. Said the numbers didn't lie. Then she found something else. A letter. Short. Signed by Martha Whitlock. It mentioned a payment to Reuben Voss, dated just days before their father died. The room went still. That wasn't a crack anymore. That was the truth showing itself. Outside, a board creaked. Heavy step. Too heavy to be anyone but one man. Reuben Voss. Silas closed the box halfway, motioned for the girls to move back. The door pushed open. Reuben stood there, rifle already up. He didn't look surprised, just tired. He knew this was coming. He told them to drop it. Said they should have left town when they had the chance. Silas stepped forward just enough to pull the focus. Not rushing, not reaching, just there. Reuben shifted the rifle toward him. That was the mistake. Rosalie moved first. Not fast, not perfect. Just enough. She kicked the lantern. The light spun. Shadows jumped. Reuben fired, but the shot went way, hitting wood instead of flesh. Silas closed the distance. No clean draw. No fancy move. just a hard hit that knocked the rifle aside. They went down together in the dirt, fists, weight, breath, a real fight. The kind that doesn't look good, but gets the job done. Reuben was stronger, but Silas was steadier. He didn't rush, waited for the opening. Then Silas caught a loose hammer from the dirt, struck Reuben's rifle hand hard enough to make him drop the gun, and drove him down with one final shoulder hit. He didn't look clean doing it, but he stayed alive, outside. Voices started rising. Pike fired once into the air and shouted for every man to stand back under the authority of Dodge City law. It didn't stop them all, but it bought the girls 3 precious seconds. Men running, time was gone. Rosalie grabbed the box. Eleanor held the papers tight against her chest. They ran. Not toward the house. Not toward the road. Toward the open land, where a horse could outrun a bullet if you had a little luck. Gunshots cracked behind them. Close. Too close. Silas fired once, not to kill, just to slow them down. That was enough. They made the horses, mounted fast, rode hard. No looking back. Just distance, just survival. By the time the ranch faded into the dark, nobody spoke. Didn't need to. They all knew what they had now. Not a story, not a guess. Proof. The kind that could break the power of a family like Whitlock, if it ever made it back to Dodge City. Silas finally slowed his horse, turned slightly in the saddle, looked at Eleanor, at the papers in her hands, then at the road ahead. Because one thing was clear now. Getting the truth was the easy part. Getting it heard would be the real fight. And the question hanging in the night was simple. Would Dodge City finally listen to the truth tomorrow, or would the Whitlocks make sure nobody ever heard it? They rode through the night, and Dodge City was still awake when they came back. Not loud this time, not wild. Just waiting. Like a town that knew something was about to change, but didn't yet know how. Dust followed them in, slow and tired. 3 riders carrying more than just papers, carrying truth. And in places like this, truth was heavier than any gun. Silas didn't head for a saloon, didn't look for trouble. He rode straight down Front Street, where everyone could see him. That mattered. Because if a man wanted the truth heard, he didn't whisper it in corners. He brought it into the open. Eleanor held the papers tight, like they could disappear if she blinked. Rosalie rode beside her, not looking back anymore. That part of her was gone. Deputy Pike stepped out from the boardwalk before they even stopped. This time, he didn't hesitate, didn't look over his shoulder. He stood where everyone could see him, badge catching the morning light. That was the first real change Dodge City had seen in a long time. Men started gathering. Ranch hands, shop owners, travelers who didn't know the whole story, but knew something wasn't right. And then the Whitlocks arrived. Same as always, calm, certain, like the ending had already been written in their favor. Gideon stepped forward, ready to speak, but this time, he didn't get the first word. Eleanor did. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was steady, and in that moment, steady was enough. She laid the papers out, not rushed, not angry, just truth. One piece at a time. The land never sold. The debt nearly paid. The signature forged. The payment to Reuben. The lie built slowly, carefully, until it looked like law. You could feel it shift, not in a shout, not in a fight, just in the way people started looking at Gideon instead of away from him. Pike spoke next, not as a scared man, as a lawman. He put the cartridge down. Said what it meant. Said what he should have said a long time ago. And that was enough. Because truth doesn't need to be loud when it's finally heard. Gideon tried to hold his ground. Martha tried to speak over it, but something had already broken. Not their power. That would take time, but the illusion of it. And once a town stops believing in a lie, it doesn't take long for the rest to fall. By midday, the Whitlock name didn't carry the same weight. By sunset, it carried something else, consequences. The circuit judge didn't call it finished justice, not yet. But he called it enough to make arrest. Gideon was taken to jail under guard. Martha's papers were seized before she could hide behind another clean dress and colder lie. Reuben Voss was dragged in sore, silent, and no longer so proud of that Winchester. Caleb sat quiet through it all. Jonas burned with it. Two men raised the same way, walking two very different roads. And that's the thing about life out there. Pain doesn't decide who you become. Your choices do. Eleanor and Rosalie stood in the middle of it all. Finally free. Not because someone gave it to them, because they took it back. And Silas Crow, he didn't stay for thanks, didn't stand around waiting for a town to remember his name. Men like him don't belong to places. They pass through them, do what needs to be done, then keep riding. He was already at the edge of town when they found him. Horse ready, dust waiting. Same as always. Eleanor looked at him first, not as someone who needed saving anymore, as someone who had chosen her own path. Rosalie smiled a little, said the road didn't scare her like it used to. Silas didn't promise them anything, didn't offer comfort. He just told them the truth. The road would be hard, lonely, unforgiving. Eleanor said a quiet life built on fear wasn't living. Rosalie said if they were going to be free, they might as well be free all the way. Silas looked at them both for a long second, then gave a small nod. He didn't say he loved them. Men like Silas didn't spend words that carelessly. But Eleanor saw it in the way he made room beside him. Rosalie saw it in the way he didn't ask them to follow, only waited long enough for them to choose. That was all it took. 3 riders left Dodge City that morning. No big farewell, no crowd watching. Just dust rising behind them, and a story the town would never quite forget. Now here's the part I want you to sit with for a second. Because this story isn't really about guns. It's not even about Dodge City. It's about a line every man sees at some point in his life. The moment where something isn't right, and you know it. The moment where staying quiet feels easier, safer, but also wrong. Silas Crow didn't change the world that day. He changed one moment, and that was enough to change everything that came after it. I've seen men spend their whole lives waiting for the right time to do the right thing. Truth is, that time never feels right. It feels risky, uncertain, sometimes even foolish. But looking back, it's always clear. You either stepped forward, or you didn't. So, let me ask you something simple. If you were standing there that day, under that same sun, watching what was happening, would you have spoken up or would you have looked away like everyone else? And one more thing. When life puts you in front of your own version of that moment, because it will, it always does. Will you be ready to say the words that matter, or will you let silence decide for you from my side? I'll tell you this. I don't think men remember the easy days. We remember the ones where something inside us said, this is the line, and we chose who we were going to be. If this story meant something to you, if it made you think about your own line, your own choices, then stay with me on this road.
Hit like, subscribe, and tell me what you would have done. Because there are a lot more stories out there.
Some rougher, some quieter, but all of them worth telling before you ride off. I'll say this plain. This story was collected, retold, and shaped with a few added details to bring out the lesson, the feeling, and the value of the tale. The images are AI-made illustrations created to help you feel the moment, not to claim that every scene happened exactly this way, and the title and thumbnail are there to carry the emotion of the story, the way an old campfire tale carries truth even when the dust has settled. If you felt something real in this one, leave a comment and let me know. I'll keep finding stories worth sitting down for.